The planets have aligned, and once again, a day late, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink podcast with me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin. This week on the telephone from Fuerteventura, Andy the Asshole. Woo! And of course, we can't do any of this without bestie Stevie Tel Avivi.
Here in person.
This week we'll be discussing Doge, Elon Musk, tariffs, Tesla, and we're going back to a subject that we all know better than just about anything else, which is entrepreneurship, which is weird, right? Because we are classified as an entrepreneurship podcast. And I think the original genesis of the podcast was more to do with entrepreneurship than anything else. It kind of morphed, it grew hair, arms, legs, and teeth and became an AI podcast. But the original idea was we'd talk more about business.
Yeah, and I think actually the beginning of us as a threesome was thruplets was entrepreneurialism. We all met at an entrepreneurial accelerator,
and we will tell that story one day for sure. Yeah. We won't do it on this episode, but we do need to do a bit of a backstory. Maybe that's going to be in the next week or two. So, Stephen, do you want to get us kicked off on Doge, Elon, tariffs, Tesla? They've been dominating the news cycle this week. It's kind of hard to avoid it. Where do you want to take us on that?
It's hard to avoid, and I think I wanted to start this by kind of just setting out where we wanted to attack it from, which is we're not politicians, and I don't want to comment on politics because ultimately a country has voted, a country has elected a president, and they are bringing into place policies which they believe will benefit the country, and for that they've got to be applauded. You know, they're making some strong choices. And of course, like every country, there are people on both sides of the equation. So I wanted to come at it from, I think, maybe starting with just looking back now at Doge and seeing where we were. And I think that can reflect, again, today I think we're going to not have a lot of statistics. These are going to be a lot of opinions, I think we're talking about today. But a lot of news coming out from America saying that perhaps Elon is no longer the man in charge, that a lot of his decisions on Doge are now being delegated down to him from the Secretariat. So the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defence, he's almost like a third-party contractor coming in. And I think that's kind of an interesting one because I wanted to kind of try and get a sense of what has Doge saved so far. And no one's going to know. This is going to be a story that history will tell us. The figure being bandied about by those on the positive side is up to 100 billion.
Yeah.
$4 billion a day was a number that Elon self-certed yesterday. Yeah. $4 billion a day is their average run rate.
And I think on the other side of that coin, what has been verifiable maybe as little as $2 to $3 billion, because there's all kinds of mistakes, errors, accounting things. We've mentioned before the difficulty. You may specify these things, but actually getting them stopped is much more difficult. And they're not finding, or there does not appear to be mass fraud anywhere. So these have been decisions made by previous American governments through a democratic process. And what we're seeing at the moment is possibly that, yep, it's a great exercise. I'm sure we all wish we were doing it, but we're a long way from seeing massive savings. Also, on the other side...
I don't know. Sorry, Stephen. There's a wee bit of delay there. Sorry for cutting across you.
Go for it.
Carry on.
No, go ahead, Andy. Because it would be better than you coming in with a big delay every time. So go ahead.
Yeah. I actually, like, all of the commentary that I've read and heard has basically been entirely the opposite of your opening there, which is there has been massive fraud uncovered. The most recent example of which, I don't know if you've been following this story, is they reckon there could be tens or up to $100 billion worth of these pop-up NGOs. So this seems to be the ruse in Washington now, where you stand up your non-governmental organization, apply to one of these USAID type departments for a grant of $150 billion, which you get with very little oversight about what you do with that. And of course, these people that are standing up, the charges that they're making out like bandits of it. And that explains why a lot of these senators, a lot of these politicians, senior politicians in America, that explains why they have these kind of 10, 20, $30 million net worths when they've only been earning a couple of $100,000 a year through their career.
Again, I think only history and audits, and that's part of the problem, I think, and we touched on this in a previous pod. Unless we see proper oversight and proper drilling down as to what's happening, there's definitely a purpose in doing this.
Yeah.
But let's think of the other side of that. So we're already seeing that Elon is being slightly sidestepped, no longer having the cut power that he had, possibly being downgraded slightly by Trump. We're also seeing on the other side of the coin, because let's think about budgets, US budgets, like any country, cut what we spend, but increase what we get in tax, because ultimately it's taxation is the second part of that calculation. And again, everything that I can see is showing that what we're going to see this year is going to be a dropping in revenues. And if the proposed changes to taxation come in, we're going to see a further drop in revenues. Now, add to that the fact that this may be a blip, but the stock market is taking a real hit at the moment. And of course, if that happens, then there's going to be less capital gains, and that will have a further blip. So on one hand, you got to ask yourself, is the uncertainty that's being created and the impact that's having actually worth the effort? Is it being counterproductive? So that, I think, just is my kind of overview of the American larger position before we go into Tesla itself.
I think when I think about Doge, I think about a couple of things, right? I think at its core, nobody really quarrels with the idea of, can we go in and find and reduce waste? And I think it's a fair point to say that the bulk of it is waste.
Yep.
There's undoubtedly fraud, but in the pantheon of $1 trillion worth of overall as a bucket of money, I think the fraud is fairly limited. But again, these numbers are so astronomical that $50 billion could literally be, described
considered
as
not a lot of money.
Inconsequential sum of money here. But don't forget, I mean, we're 30 days in to Doge? I mean, it's only just got started, and it's only came into contact with a couple of percent of the entire federal government. So I don't think at this point there's any legitimate criticism that can say, well, they're not finding as much as we thought they would. They've literally only started. There's another 18 months of this to go. And I think the numbers will rack up. Like Andy said, the number Elon threw out there the other day was they're up to a run rate of $4 billion a day of waste. And listen, I think we focus on the, transgender operas in Belarus and all the silly examples, but there really is more pedestrian stuff, but it really adds up. There was something, our friends on the All In podcast mentioned it the other day, 33,000 ServiceNow licenses for something like 800 employees. And that stuff is everywhere. It's not just in one place. Yep. It is literally everywhere. And by the way, I know how easy that accumulates. I even saw a bit of that in my own business. We actually had a bi-weekly call on a Thursday called War on Waste, because as we acquired other companies and grew the team, you did end up with this legacy that needed to be managed. And I knew what that was like in a company with like 75 people in it. So I can't imagine what that's like in an organization with 1 million employees.
But we've had this discussion before, and you're one of the smartest guys I know. The reality is that you said you wouldn't want to work in a company or run a company above a certain number of employees, because the mindset of that is so different. And none of us would say anything other than Musk is a genius in so many ways. There's a difference between running really efficient companies where it's minimum viable product, it's getting things done quickly and efficiently, bootstrapping. But that's not how you run a country. And I think that's what we're beginning to realise, that there's lots and lots of what needs to be taken into government by what he's doing, but it's not the only answer, and it's causing more problems, or as many problems that it's solving. And that's what I said in day one. It needs to be done, but it needs to be done right rather than done.
Yeah, and accuracy and detail matters.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest problems, I think the effort's good, it's worthwhile, we absolutely need it, but coming out with half-cocked, half-baked information. By the way, I don't expect them to get 100% accuracy across trying to cut $1 trillion, right? I think that's an impossible standard that nobody could ever be held to. I mean, mistakes will be made as long as the mistakes are a fraction of the overall effort and they're rectified quickly. I think it's just part and parcel of the process. Nobody could expect anybody to get 100% right. But there's almost, you see it, there's a feverish rush to get out there in the media with the information, whether it's fully baked, half-cocked, and I think that's what's screwing them up. And I think that's what's sending people off the deep end.
And it's also not doing
But let's remember what the objective is here, right? They're trying to stop the American government from going broke. So at the moment, America spends $1 trillion every year, more than they spend on defense, on credit card interest. If you just add time to that equation, and as Elon said in that interview yesterday, if you add time to the equation and you continue borrowing at a couple of $1 trillion a year, eventually, not too far into the distant future from now, all government taxation gets eaten up on credit card interest, and there's no money for anything.
But if you take that,
and when Andy says credit card interest, he means the interest payments on the debt, the national
government
debt.
bonds. And again, don't disagree. And I think we all realise that's an existential crisis to many governments, including our own. But if that was the purpose, we'd be looking at the other side of the equation. We would be looking at least maintaining our level of taxation. We wouldn't be cutting it. And again, everything that we're seeing is leading to a cut. And who gets the cut? The wealthy. And again, I'm not going to even debate today trickle down. Trickle down does not exist. When wealthy people get tax cuts, they save it. They look after their future selves. They look after their future family. So all I'm saying is, I think that is not at the moment proving to be great for savings as yet. Yeah, it's not proving to be great for Elon, and we'll come on to that in a second. Let's talk just really quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time. Just quickly about tariffs. And again,
Stephen, see just before you go into tariffs, can I say one final thing on Doge? One of the things that I am happy about this is that it has inspired these Doge-type entities to start emerging in other countries. I'll give you an example very locally. So James Watt, the entrepreneur behind Brewdog, is putting together a consortium just now and seriously petitioning the government with essentially the proposition of, let me be Doge for you. So there are smart business guys that are being inspired by this effort that are trying to pull together a team of smart people to start these Doge type efforts. Because just remember, the UK government isn't as much of a basket case in terms of deficits as America, but we are spending way and beyond what we bring in taxation every year. So I do think there's
does James Watt want to be the next guy who's getting his pub windows smashed in? It sounds like you can't get involved in any of these things without inviting a heap of problems onto yourself.
Or without doing it right. And I think, again, let's just quickly go on.
But what does do it right mean? Because I think when you say that, what you mean is a slow, long, lumbering process that goes through Congress and Senate and recommendations. And I don't think there's enough time between now and the world ending to do it that way. That's what got us here in the first place, that approach.
Well, I don't know if it's that approach. I think it's lack of willingness. So again, nothing in life, in my opinion, is that complicated. The minute it gets complicated, excuse my language, someone's getting screwed.
Something's getting fucked.
It's basically down to, you've got to take more money in, you've got to spend less money. And it doesn't have to be radical. It can be a little bit every day. So all you have to start doing is spend a bit less, earn a bit more. And it doesn't, and there is a balance, and we can talk about the UK. Taxation has to be at a level that encourages people to work and to make and to create wealth, because wealth is good for everyone. But ultimately, everyone has to pay their share. So you can't just look at one side of the equation. A little bit done right is much better than what we're having, which is a lot of bad feeling, bad publicity. And it doesn't have to be. So, done right is sometimes slower, but I'd rather do it slow and it sticks.
I actually think if these guys were not such media whores for our friends in America, I don't think you would actually have a tenth of the backlash that you're seeing right now. If this was just being done behind closed doors without inviting the entire world's media into the Oval Office for 10 hours. I mean, there is one issue I take with this. How the fuck can you get anything done if you're having multi-hour long press conferences every day? And I know that the alternative take on that as well, the previous guy never spoke to the media at all. I get it. But we don't need to have these guys on the TV all day long, every day. And if they are on the TV all day long, every day, what are they actually getting done outside of that? If this was happening quietly behind closed doors at the same furious pace it's happening right now, I don't think we would be talking about this at all. Yeah. And I don't think Teslas would be getting incinerated up and down the country.
And I think, again, what we're beginning to realise is that those in power in America are realising it's not just as simple as taking a knife to everything, because the Secretary of Transport understands transport better than Elon does or Doge does. So again, no one disagrees with the fundamentals. Something is definitely showing stress, and all I'm saying is maybe it's time to just look at that again. You're absolutely right. Done quietly, an announcement once every 3 months. We've seen this, this, and this. We've verified that, and that. We've saved this. Fabulous. But this silly numbers, which the example I got was an $8 billion contract with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement was later revealed to be a clerical error. The correct value was 8 million. Now again, far better to have just reported 8 million, having looked at it, checked it, and verified it. So we could debate this all night. I think we could all agree, I hope, that things need to be changed. On tariffs, again, not really our place, but I just wanted to try and get my head around what a tariff is. As far as I understand it, it's a tax. And it's there to do one of two things. It's there to protect an industry. And we all agree that there are industries that we need to have. We need to keep them safe. We need to have them. So steel would be a classic one. We need to have a steel industry because we need to be able to make our own stuff. One of my favourite stories was Britain almost lost, I can't remember if it was the First or the Second World War, because we ran out of trees. And that's why we have the Forestry Commission, because we didn't have enough trees to shore up the mines, to dig the minerals, to build the armaments. Right. So there are things that you need to have in your country. Tariffs are there to protect those industries. I get that. Tariffs are also there to protect or to deal with imbalances where you've got someone, perhaps like China, which is subsidising its own manufacturing by government subsidies, so to even the playing field. But I'm not...
Look at the can industry in China. My God, there's an example of an industry that was fully supported and subsidised by government, and by doing so is basically taking over the entire global car market.
But, and I can see why you might want to then put tariffs on China. But what I'm struggling to understand is why you would want to put tariffs on Canada. Never mind, the relationship, good or bad. I don't understand what the purpose of it was, what the imbalance of it was. If it was just, we're buying more from you than you're buying from us, that's free trade. That's what America, I thought, was all about. And what we know from our own experience is if you protect an industry, it becomes inefficient. The whole point of capitalism and entrepreneurialism is let the fit survive, let great businesses flourish. And if you've got competition, it should make you stronger. So that's the Canada one's a real head scratcher for me. I mean, the Mexico one is more obvious, right? They're saying they've got a serious issue at the southern border. There's a lot of fentanyl coming through, and they're trying to incentivize the Mexican government to shore up their end to basically seal up the border. Totally understand the case for tariffs in that particular regard. In terms of Canada, honestly, from the outside looking in, it just looks like a shakedown for money. There doesn't seem to be any plausible excuse. There's almost no fentanyl coming through, even after Trudeau's £1.3 billion border plan. Well, they've shored up the border with extra troops and extra border officials and drones and stuff like that. They only reduced the already tiny amount of fentanyl coming through by, it was the equivalent of like half a bag of sugar or something like that, yeah. But even with Mexico, and again, I understand the issue that they've got, but again, you can see that immigration now is down to a tiny level, down to like 8,000 incidents from many, many tens of thousands of incidents. But even that, are tariffs the right stick to hit someone with? And that's the bit I don't quite understand, So all I'm saying is I'm trying not to make an opinion about government policy. That's government policy. They can do what they like. I'm just trying to understand what it's trying to achieve, and I don't get it at the moment.
It's two things, isn't it? It's either modify behaviour or raise revenue. Look at Michael O'Leary from Ryanair, right? Michael O'Leary had his own tariffs. So if you came to the airport without a boarding pass, he charged you $100 to print a boarding pass for you because he wanted to modify your behaviour so you never came to the airport again without a boarding pass.
It was a training tool.
If you want to check a bag, he charged you 40 quid to check a bag instead of adding it to the base fare and charging everybody that because he wanted to modify your behaviour and for you to bring a cabin bag rather than a check bag. So there's one version of tariffs which is, are you using tariffs to modify behaviour? That could well be true in Mexico, right? We know that the cartels and we know that it's a meaningful inflow of drugs and bad things into the United States. So for me, that one's fairly legit. It's maybe a modify behaviour. And then other things are just can we raise revenue? And there definitely seems to be a kind of mindset where if I can just come on the TV every day and talk about another $50 billion we brought into the country, or 200 billion or 400 billion or 800 billion, then somehow the public will like that. The stock market will be happy. And I think some of these tariffs that we're struggling to get our head around are just literally how can I raise revenue and present that to the country as...
So in the first one...
Which gets back to my previous point, which is just, it looks from the outside looking in like a shakedown for cash and nothing more. There doesn't seem to be that. There's no ask.
Let me just clarify, because again, as always, great point, modifying behaviour. So thank you, really get that. But if you're raising revenue, let's be clear, who's paying that? Who's paying the tariff? It's not Canada. It's American citizens in the price of their vehicles. So you're not punishing anyone. You may. All you're going to do is put up the price of things they're importing, and give leeway to American producers to up their prices to match or to slightly undercut cheaper products coming from abroad. You're not raising revenue for the American government or the American people. So again, modified behaviour, yes. Raising revenue, wrong people.
Well, you can with one proviso, if you make an assumption that the tariffs won't be reciprocal. So a lot of the countries that have had tariffs imposed on them, the message coming from the administration is, do not dare try anything reciprocal or else. So if you've got a big guy punching a little guy in the nose and saying, don't punch me back, I just want to punch you until I feel better, that's fine. You can punch the little guy until you feel better. But if the little guy starts punching back, and obviously I don't think they calculated that Canada was going to have such an anaphylactic response. And I was actually surprised by just how ready to go to the mat that they were, from, turning off power to 1.5 million people in Michigan to, removing all American products out the LCBO, which is the biggest purchaser of alcohol in the world, and so on and so forth. I think America have probably been quite rocked back onto their heels by how anaphylactic and aggressive Canada's response has been. Because I think there's a feeling in Canada that it was kind of existential. Like, if these tariffs went on and stayed on for a long time, it was just economically going to send them back to a terrible place.
But I think what you've again clarified is, again, it's a double whammy on the American people, because Canadians are not buying American goods, so that's going to affect American businesses, and Americans will be paying more for Canadian goods, which is going to cost them more. So again, there's no answer to tariffs, but I don't think any of us are able to come up with a great understanding, and that's kind of also impacting onto markets, and it's also, so we've got a stock market pullback at the moment, and we've seen, I think it flattened out today, but we've seen Tesla drop dramatically.
Yes.
Now, it's a very speculative share, so we've seen Tesla go up and down,
which has happened many times before.
Yeah.
But there's two things I think we see with Tesla. It's either there's great news and it's and the fundamentals somehow change, or it's a momentum stock. It goes in a direction. People seem to bet it up or bet it down. And I think the question I'm trying to, again, be clear in my own head is this momentum at the moment? Elon is out of favour. Tesla is a great representation of Elon, and therefore the price goes down. Fabulous buying opportunity. Or have we seen the fundamentals change? So sales are down, so therefore Tesla is valued as an IT stock, not as a car stock.
Yeah.
Sales are down, and none of the massive changes that we have been waiting for have come through yet, and indeed people have taken a lead. Now, that may be turned around in a year or 2 years, and they're suddenly back on the up again, but are we seeing a momentum move, or are we seeing a change in the fundamentals?
So let me provide my opinion on that. So Tesla stock is only where it was at September last year. It is literally where it was at September 2024. Right now, it's about $228 a share, and that's where it was roughly in September 2024. So you don't have to go back that far for Tesla to have been
representing
at
about 700 billion in market cap, which is still more than the entire car industry globally.
Yeah, I mean, it went up massively on the back of the election. I think people were expecting certain things there based on Elon's alignment with Trump, and that massively inflated. So I actually don't think you're seeing a collapse in Tesla. I think Tesla's reverting back to the mean because it was on an absolute rampage through the course of late last year and early this year. So here's Paddy's viewpoint on it. For sure, I don't think the way that Elon's so public and vocal on X and his connection with Doge, for sure that is somehow impacting the performance of Tesla. I think to the extent of which is being overplayed massively. What we don't know actually is if Tesla's sales are down. We know deliveries are down, right? Because that's fundamentally how car revenue gets measured. You only measure the revenue when you deliver the vehicle.
Vehicles delivered, yeah.
Now, what we know is that they've came to the end of production of their biggest selling car, the Model Y. They do 1.4 million units a year. So that is, the Model Y is the business. Model Y is the overwhelming majority of the business, followed by 3 Model S and Model X are
X and Cybertruck
insignificant. So the Model Y is the big money maker. They've been winding that down, production of that down, so that they literally can stop the plants and then start ramping production of the new Model Y Juniper. Now, I'm going to make up numbers here. If you are making 100,000 Model Ys a month and you're cutting over to a new car, you don't just seamlessly cut over and make 100,000 of the new car the following month. Production dips massively. Literally 200 units a day they were making at some point in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But the expectation is very rapidly, within a month or two, they get to 2,500 units a day. So you've got a massive dip in production. And so you're going to actually see the deliveries and therefore the revenue numbers, I think, be quite depressed for the next couple of quarters until they get back to full production again. Because they're doing that production ramp across 5 different facilities in 4 different continents. So I think that accounts for a lot of what you're seeing. I think people are confused in that way. I think demand is there. I've not seen any evidence that there's no demand. What we have seen is that deliveries have dropped significantly. But a lot of that can be explained with a cut over from the old car to the new car.
It's going to be interesting.
Tesla's got a couple of different issues just now. It's clear that this short-term collapse in the stock market, in my opinion, is more of a political short-term dynamic than it is a kind of structural issue with Tesla's business model. And by the way, anybody that's still saying that Elon get into this for personal gain, I mean, how do you like those fucking apples?
Yeah.
The guy's getting Starlink contracts cancelled like there's no tomorrow. Tesla stock's collapsing. So anybody that was still charging him with somehow he was making money out of all this is really got some egg in their face. And this is a warning, by the way, for entrepreneurs the world over. Be very careful before you get into politics. Like, it doesn't always work out in your favour. So it's clear part of this is a political dynamic. I agree with most of what you said there, Paddy, in terms of the business aspect for Tesla. I think there's a couple of things that you need to acknowledge as well, which is outside of America, Tesla is a 2-product company.
Yeah.
It's Model 3 and it's Model Y. And we both had Model 3s, Paddy. You have a Model Y. And guess what? Your Model Y that you bought last year looks like
2
the
years
Model
ago.
Y that was available. But it looks like the Model Y that was available 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's identical in every way.
Yeah.
The Model 3 that I had was identical to the Model 3 that you could buy 6 years ago. So I think the product line's tired. I think the refreshes have made them fabulous, even more fabulous cars. I mean, the Model 3 Highland is objectively a phenomenal car. And the Model Y Juniper, with the styling updates and all the refinements in terms of suspension and cabin noise and stuff like that, is again a tremendous car. And it will take a bit of time to ramp. But it is a two-product company outside of America. And of course, their competitors are now offering fabulous cars that have got roughly the same capability. Let's face it, a lot of them much better interiors, and with most of the capability at a much cheaper price, particularly the Chinese car manufacturers, who seem to be really on the rampage at the moment.
And let's go back to one thing which I said at the beginning, which is Tesla. All of that is fine, but Tesla is valued as an IT stock, not as a car maker.
Yeah.
And therefore the problem is, and we've all sat and we've talked about all of the fabulous things, and Elon's promised this and promised that. And a lot of that promise and belief was upheld by our goodwill of a very, very smart man doing lots of things. Some of that belief for the moment seems to be waning. Some of that belief, that goodwill has gone.
Yeah.
And what we've discussed ourselves between us is that even if he has self-driving in the next short period, it's probably not going to have the impact that we saw it 5 years ago when he first started talking about it, because Waymo's already there, already making inroads. The ability to be robo-taxis is probably not going to be what we thought it was, because actually outside the city centre, the need for them is not nearly as much. So some of the things, the robots that we keep hearing and talking about, the last time he showed them was a massive failure. And that's not to say that they won't come online, it won't be there eventually. But at the moment, based just on a new Model Y and better numbers, it still is a vastly overvalued stock. And I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't be, but I think the goodwill that he had around the world from some of the things that he was doing on a tech basis, I think for the short term is gone. He's an amazing entrepreneur. The stuff he's done with SpaceX has been incredible. The stuff he does with Neuralink, but I think for a period of time, he's going to have a couple of big wins to get back on the right side of everyone.
Okay. Guys, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What the fuck happened to Cybertruck? Cybertruck got launched, 6 months ago, 8 months ago? Apparently there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pre-orders went in. And now, apparently, if you order a Cybertruck tomorrow, you can probably get delivery in a couple of weeks' time. What happened to the demand for Cybertruck?
I'm not... I think
Andy, first deliveries of Cybertruck were in 2023. So that was, they came out 6 months
really?
ago.
Yeah.
So,
all right, I thought it was...
I think the problem with Cybertruck is it turns out it's actually not a very good truck. And Americans use the trucks like trucks are supposed to be used. It's not like European trucks, which are basically used to take the kids to school.
Yeah.
They use their trucks as trucks. And to haul things and tow things, it turns out electrification is still not quite a great solution for that.
And let's be honest, in the rest of the world, we don't like the idea of a truck that will basically run over the top of your car and kill everyone in every vehicle.
And it's very expensive, and it's got a really polarizing design. Some people think it's gorgeous. Some people think it's hideous looking. I mean, it's super polarizing. And it turns out not to be a great truck. If you're using a truck as a work truck, it's not a great truck. There are better, more capable, cheaper options. And it's only available in one market in the world. It's only available in the US. Yeah. There's no European version of it.
And it's not very customizable. And as you and I spoke, Paddy, people like the fancy colour that nobody else has got, and the fancy wheels that very few people have, because it makes the product
There's a reason
more unique.
When you buy a fancy car, it
perceived
comes
higher
in
value.
25 colours, for 10 different trim options, because there's some allure to people about making it theirs. Yeah. Picking that colour option at the end. There's signalling, whereas your Cybertruck looks like everybody else's Cybertruck, unless you spend $8,000 having it wrapped.
I think It's been an interesting chat today.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that we can really take away from other than it's a really interesting world. There's a lot of things changing, and I think that's probably the one thing that we can all agree on. The world has never been like this before. I'm probably the oldest of the three of us. I never remember a time where the world has been just quite so uncertain. And therefore, these questions I think we're all asking all the time. So it's been good, I hope, to kind of chat about them tonight.
Here's what I'll wrap up on Tesla, guys, just before we move into the entrepreneurship chat. I still think 50% of the value of Tesla is tied up in the promise of autonomy. And, you know, as somebody who, again, has sat for years listening to Elon saying, this will be the year, this will be the year, this will be the year, I've never been more certain that this will be the year. If you watch the reviews for the latest version of FSD, they are absolutely staggering, and they've got the architecture to do it. You know, they've got the training cluster, they've got the training data, they've got the millions of miles driven. And I do still believe, don't underestimate the protective instincts of parents. Once it's clear that this generalized self-driving product is available and many times safer than a human driver. My daughter has literally just passed her test in the last few weeks. I will fucking definitely put her in a Model 3 because it will be way, way, way more safer than she is driving the roads of Ayrshire.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a lot of people that will do that as well. So that's my wee kind of finale on Tesla.
I feel, despite this blip, I have zero doubts about the future of Tesla. They're absolutely flush with cash. They can ride out any short to medium term blip, and I think they have a product roadmap that is better than just about anybody else in the world. And I believe in the future. Elon's been painting for Tesla. Is he always late? Yeah, but he usually actually delivers. And by the way, like, when you go on X and you go, you see, if only he was more interested in his rocket company, then the Starship wouldn't have blew up if he wasn't doing Doge. There's so many dumb fucking takes on the internet. It's almost hard to watch. The amount of dumb commentary on Elon on the internet. If only it was more focused on Tesla, the stock wouldn't have. It's like, fuck off, you idiots. You know, like, do you think Elon's actually the guy building rockets, operationalizing a company with tens of thousands of employees? He's got an incredible leadership team that's making that happen over there. I'm sure he has input, but the fact that he's busy on Doge right now is not the reason the Starship blew up, right? No, the Starship blew up because we're on an iterative path to a capable, reliable product that is going through development.
Fully reusable.
Just as the model, as the Falcon 9 went through and blew up all the times before it became reliable. So there's some really fucking dumb commentary on the internet.
It's just a lack of understanding. It's a lack of
anyway,
understanding.
Anyway, we're 37 minutes in, guys, and Andy the asshole is desperate to get away for his dinner in the island of Fuerteventura. So let's do a little bit, maybe do 10 minutes on entrepreneurship, and we'll wrap up on the 50-minute mark. So who wants to get us kicked off here, Andy? Do you want to lead us in?
Yeah, so I think, like you know, we started off this podcast that was going to be kind of entrepreneurship heavy, and just through osmosis and the general kind of people that we ended up finding in terms of listenership, it just ended up kind of drifting more towards kind of tech and AI. But the roots of this was always supposed to be in kind of practical entrepreneurship. So kind of put up the bat signal after last week's episode before we flew out here, just to try and kind of get an idea of what people were looking to know about entrepreneurship. And there was 2 to 3 kind of common themes that kept coming back to. So one of them was roundabout failure, so risk and failure in entrepreneurship. And I think when you look from the outside in and you see somebody that's had a bit of success, I've been in business for 18 years. Stephen, you've been in business for 20 odd years. Paddy, you've been in business forever. And we've all had a wee bit of success to varying different degrees. And I think people look for the outside looking in, and they just assume that things must have just came easy to you, and they assume that you're just hitting stuff at the park all the time. But I think it's important to really let people know out there that the resting heart rate of entrepreneurship, for the most part, is failure. Most things that I've done in my career have not worked. Most things that I've done in my business haven't worked. Paddy, I remember vividly. Do you remember the 2-hour conversations that we were having at night when you were pulling your fucking hair out? When it turns out America was the thing that needed to happen for your company to get that outsized exit that you ended up getting. But actually, there was a period of time for like 24 months where just nothing was working in America.
Yeah.
So, and Stephen, I'm not sure to what extent, you faced kind of, failure or setbacks and stuff in your own career, in your own business.
My situation was slightly different in that I worked in professional services. I'm a lawyer to trade. So it's harder to fail in that you have got a professional qualification, but it's all the mistakes that you make in business. So there's a difference between, I think, being a reasonably well-paid professional and a successful legal business. And that is littered with difficult decisions, bad decisions, mistakes, and each one made the next iteration of the business better. So I was unusual, I think, to some extent, in that I went through 3 or 4 different partnerships. And my favourite story is, it's like the man that gets divorced 4 times. The only common denominator in all 4 divorces was him.
Is you.
So I apologise to all of my ex-partners.
Previous partners.
But each of those changes made me see what had worked well and hadn't worked in the previous business and made the next business stronger. So same scenario. I just had a slightly easier fallback position in that I was always going to make a good living just by being a professional person.
I've been thinking a lot
Paddy,
about this. So I'll be speaking to a couple of 100 kids at the end of the month, 6-year leavers, about entrepreneurship. My sister leads a kind of business class at school. And the truth is, entrepreneurship really isn't for most people. It's not, because most people are not prepared to do what it takes in order to be successful. And so I'd say for the overwhelming majority of people, entrepreneurship is not for you. And I think entrepreneurs are kind of easy to spot. They've almost got an obsessive quality about them. It makes them really boring in a fucking restaurant or a bar when they're boring people shitless about their businesses. I know that. I was that guy. But there's an obsession, and it kind of takes that. My experience with business is business needs everything you've got in order to work. Yeah. Which is why side hustles and, I'll start something on the side while working a job, all those things almost never work, because even when you're in these things heart and soul, it's almost impossible to make them work. So the idea that you could just do it as a side hustle is, pretty incongruous to me.
I think it's also, when you look back the way, you realise the price that you paid. You paid with your health.
Yeah.
You pay it with relationships.
Yeah.
Because and I think we can all to some extent understand this, and I've been chatting to some legal business owners during the week. It's your baby. It's literally like another child, and you create it, you nourish it, and it becomes all consuming. And it's not always a healthy relationship you have with your business. People that find that balance. So what's it someone said? Everyone envies what you've got. No one envies what you did to get it.
Yeah, for sure.
Amen to that. Now, Paddy, when you think, so obviously I coined the phrase years ago that business is the art of taking repeated penalty kicks to the teeth without getting terminally disheartened. Yeah. And that is genuinely my quote. And a lot of that comes through personal experience. But when what's the 120-second version, just to show the iterations that you went through to overcome a failure or a setback in your business. So when you think about the American thing and you think about the challenges that you had, what were the important pivots that you made at the time to finally get the breakthrough and finally establish yourself as a serious player in B2B e-commerce in America?
I think it depends on the size of the business. If you're just a startup and you're a one-man band or there's a couple of people, it's different. Failure then is different to what failure looks like if you've got 50 employees.
Yeah.
I don't think there was ever any point where every part of the business was failing all at once, but there was almost never a point where at least one part of the business was not failing. And so there was times where sales was great, sales was kicking ass, but product couldn't do anything to save its life. And then there was periods where marketing and sales were completely upside down, but the product team were kicking ass. So I did find it very, very difficult to get to a point where every single part of the business was firing on all cylinders simultaneously. And that never really happened for us right up until the last 2 years. So I was in business for nearly 18 years, and I would say 14 or 15 years of that was triaging meaningful amounts of failure in various different parts of the business. It did feel like whack-a-mole for the longest time. You know, you'd go over to market and you'd solve something there, and then as soon as you'd solved that, sales would go upside down, or key employees would leave, and then you had to fill that gap. So it was the most frustrating thing. I'll be honest with you, I think people romanticize what it's like to be an entrepreneur, and they go, oh, wow, you know, It's been a great journey. I never enjoyed it at all. It's what I did because it's what I knew how to do instinctively. And then I learned a lot from people earlier in my career that made me particularly good at it. But I'd be lying to say that I really, really enjoyed the process. I think the last 5 years of the business were just incredible amounts of stress and anxiety at all times.
I couldn't agree more. This whole kind of, hey, let's have fun is not worth doing. You know, we both know somebody that's got this whole, we're doing business, we're doing fun. It's all about fun and stuff. I'm like, fucking maybe in your business, like in my experience, it's been a fucking absolute ball ache from start to finish that spits out a really healthy profit at the end of the year. So it's kind of still worth it. But yeah, I mean, that... So to me, I just wanted to really set the expectation out there, particularly for young people listening to this, that if you're going to get into business, you need to get into it with the right expectation, which is setbacks and a certain level of failure is normal, is the resting heart rate of business. But you just need to find one thing that you can absolutely nail, and that will make up and pay for a lot of failure. And the other thing is just getting into the right headspace. You know, a lot of people try and kind of drag themselves through these things through finding motivation. But in my experience is if you just focus on what's important. So motivation gets you going, but it's really kind of discipline and good habits that just keep you solid. And I certainly know that, from my own experience, that if you just fuck motivation, do you know what I mean? If you just identify what's important and make a commitment that that's the things that you're going to grind on, then it saves you from getting pulled from pillar to post based on your emotions on any given day. Just identify what's important, right? This is how my brain works. Right, that's important, it needs done, let's get it done. And that's it. And I try and give as little a fuck about how I feel about it on any given day. Some days I feel incredibly motivated. Some days I feel incredibly demotivated. Some days I feel bullish. Some days I feel fearful. But the idea that you would let that drag you all over the place, just identify what's important and what needs done and focus on the next thing. Yeah, that would be my advice.
I think what I don't want to do is put people off with it. As Paddy said, I think it's not an easy road, but it's not an impossible road. And I think one of the things great entrepreneurs do is they find a way to reframe what's going on. Mm-hmm. Because if you just go, I failed, it's a mistake, it's a problem, that's tough. That's not the life anyone wants to live. I often pose a question to students. Someone's on the phone and they're screaming at reception. They want to speak to you because they want to complain. What's the first word that goes through your mind? And the students always go, excuse my language, oh, fuck. And the reality of it is, no, the answer is fantastic. Fantastic. Someone's going to take the time and trouble to explain to me a problem with my system that I can make better. They actually want to help me. And if you reframe and what is failure? Failure is evidence of effort. You tried something, you've learned something that doesn't work. It's going to make it better next time. And then the other thing is to understand that success is not something that comes on you. It takes you a lifetime to be an overnight success. It starts as a dribble, and then it's a stream, and then it's a river, then it's a torrent, then it's a sea. But don't go into anything expecting to be successful. Yeah. Go into something that you love doing. Go into something where you feel passionate about, you want to make something of. And I think what we've all done to some extent is you find a way to twist your business to suit your personality. Yeah. So I ended up being a business development guy. I'm at best a competent solicitor, but I love business development, and we can talk about how you became such in another discussion. But ultimately, I found a way to make business development about how I made my firm great.
Yeah.
And then I delivered what I thought was a good product with great business development. So find the thing that you can do, and then find the people around you that have the skill sets to add and supplement what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good one. So we'll finish on that segment there. The last thing I wanted to do before we finish the show, because time is running short tonight, is talk about the importance of mentorship in business. So one of the wee anecdotes that I wanted to share was that Paddy and I have been really lucky to actually have brilliant mentors all the way through our career. Starting off where we all started working from Uncle Joe. Shout out Uncle Joe. So Uncle Joe had a kind of small office products dealership in Ayrshire. And at 16, you get flung into the family business. And this is a hack and a pro tip for all young kids coming out of school. It's great to do a couple of years, 2 or 3 years experience in a small entrepreneurial led business, because I still think to this day, we had other mentors as we went through our journey towards entrepreneurship, but I think the grounding that we got in general business knowledge working for my Uncle Joe's dealership was absolutely second to none. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I wasn't the finance guy, but I sat across the desk with Kenny Stewart, who was, and I heard every call he made for 10 years. And because of that, through kind of osmosis and just being kind of having a general awareness of what was going on around me, I actually built up a relatively decent understanding of, credit control and bank facilities and the conversations and stuff that he was having with bank managers. I wasn't a logistics guy, but like every small business, you had to pitch hit. And if there was a really busy delivery run in the morning, you had to go through, grab the delivery notes and start lugging boxes of paper and boxes of staples and stuff into Billy McLeod's van. And if you do that for enough years, and sometimes you have to jump in the van and go and deliver the stuff yourself, you end up building up a very good kind of well-rounded view of kind of logistics and how that whole thing works. So we both worked in my Uncle Joe's business for years and years and years at the very start of our career. And I think to this day, Paddy, I'm sure you would agree, it was really where we got our foundational knowledge in general business.
100%. It gave us the exposure.
Shout out Uncle Joe.
Absolutely. Gave us the exposure to all the different parts of business: finance, credit control, sales, marketing, retail, logistics, credit control, systems. I was the systems guy in there running the fax spooler and the Novell NetWare network and the guy rebooting the till 4 times a day. So it was tremendous exposure to all the different parts of business. I do think great entrepreneurs are generalists, by the way. And I would say that great entrepreneurs 100%. Are learning machines. And so this being on this journey of continuous development and accumulation of knowledge. And do you know why it's really important? Because as your business grows and you have a team eventually, and then you've got a leadership team eventually, if you're a generalist and you know enough to be dangerous about each part of the business, the most important part of that is it makes you unbullshittable. How do you know if that?
Oh yeah.
How do you know if that team over there is doing a good job if you have zero understanding of what they do? And the answer is you don't. So then you have to take people's word for it, and you don't have any sensibilities for that yourself. I think great entrepreneurs become generalists. They become learning machines, and they know enough about every part of their business to be dangerous. It makes them unbullshittable, and that's what allows you to. That allows you to motivate a team, but most importantly, hold a team accountable as well.
I think there's
100%.
also something about being creative, and I keep coming back to that. I think great entrepreneurs have creative minds, and it's about, because it's seldomly about improving existing models, although it can be. It's usually about looking at things and going, that can be done differently, and it's knowing enough. It's knowing enough to realize that you can break things and rebuild them. And it's again why we sometimes love talking about Elon Musk and that kind of stuff. Shows that constantly, first principles. But I think also it's retaining a sense of almost childishness, that creativity, thirst for knowledge, hunger for knowledge like a child, and creativity like a child. How else could it be done?
Yeah, and acquiring skills, purposefully, deliberately acquiring skills. and exercising the doing muscles. There is a class of entrepreneur who's read every fucking business book in the world, but they can't fucking do anything.
Yeah.
They
Mental
literally, they can't
masturbation.
and they don't do
Mental
anything. They devour podcasts. They read every fucking business book that's out, and they know all the theory. They just don't take action.
It's back down to Andy's first comments. My road to in business was a whole bunch of almost killed me mistakes. And you just, gosh, I'll not do that again. I'll not do that again. That was a bad idea. I'll not do that again. But you only learn that by doing. Yeah. And that's a muscle you can never atrophy.
Just as we finish up here, boys, can I just do a shout out for kind of Jim Duffy and Entrepreneurial Spark? So we went through the Entrepreneurial Spark process, which was Scotland's first startup entrepreneur accelerator course. It was run out of Sir Tom Hunter's unit in Marathon House in Dundonald. But the entrepreneurs that set it up, obviously Brian was heavily involved on it, that was on the show a few weeks ago, but it was really a guy called Jim Duffy who kind of spearheaded the whole thing. And he came up with the most fabulous hashtag and just everything, the overarching message through your entire journey through Entrepreneurial Spark was hashtag go do. And that was such a powerful message because there was plenty of chancers in there. There was people in there with ideas, and they were just playing at it, and they never really had any intentions. They just wanted to be surrounded by entrepreneurs and have access to, at the time, free internet and free desk and free computers, so they could sit in there and feel great about themselves. But the bottom line is Jim would hold everybody accountable. It's just like, Jim, I'm going to do this and I'm thinking of doing that. Great, go do. What have you done? Go do. And that's a brilliant message to send, particularly to young kids out there thinking about getting into entrepreneurship. Activity trumps everything. Go do.
It really does. And that's probably a good place to finish on, guys. So we're 56 minutes in. Andy, the asshole's wife, will be waiting in the next room for him to come free and walk down to the beach to the restaurant this evening. Where are you heading, Andy?
We're going to a place called Fado Rock Cafe for paella.
Fraggle Rock?
Fado Rock.
All right, Fado Rock. I thought you said Fraggle Rock.
We just did best paella spots in Forteventura, and that was the first one that came up. It's highly rated, so we're looking forward to it. And I've really enjoyed talking to you boys because I did spend the last 4 hours with 2 Finnish guys that I get thrown onto a golf course with, and my their English was poor, but my Finnish was 0. So you can imagine how riveting the conversation was for 4 hours fucking walking around a golf course, sweating my bollocks off. So it's been really nice to catch up with you guys.
And as I said earlier, who finished first? And on that note, do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and listen in next week when we're going to do it all again.
Guys, I've really enjoyed talking about entrepreneurship, and I think this is a theme that we'll continue to mine, and we'll maybe focus in on different areas of entrepreneurship and maybe try and fuse the 2 big subjects like AI and entrepreneurship, maybe a theme about how we can bring those together. And I can almost see a series developing here where we take a subject like sales, like marketing, like operations, like finance, and talk about the implications of AI as we build up that entrepreneurial topic within the podcast. So there you go, episode 9 in the can. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.
See you later, guys. Bye.